Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the Artist Profile series.
So you see, I have other paintings all around here. Here's a painting right here. This painting right here just has come out. This is 2,359th painting, and a guy is just now fixing to buy that painting. And that's the earth rolling up like a scroll. See, the earth just rolling up like a scroll, which is the same thing like folding away. And the Bible speaks about the earth wax a fold as doth a garment, and it's folded up, and it's no more.
Howard Finster was a folk artist and backwoods preacher from rural Georgia. He was born on December 2nd, 1916, into a family of 13 children. At the age of 3, Howard experienced an open vision where a 20-foot-tall version of his sister, Abby Rose, walked down the sky to him wearing a white robe. She told him, "Howard, you're going to be a man of visions." When young Howard relayed the vision to his mother, her face grew troubled, and she told him the news that his sister had recently died. This vision was the first of a lifelong series of strange and uncanny dreams, visions, and spiritual experiences that characterized Finster's art and life. At the age of 16, Howard began preaching at tent revivals throughout Georgia and eventually pastored several small churches. Then in 1965, he had an experience where he says God showed him how to preach through his art. One evening at a prayer meeting, he asked the congregation to recall what he had preached about that morning, but not one of them remembered. He went home that night and concluded that this method of conveying the gospel wasn't working, and it was then God showed him how to preach through his art. Howard retired from preaching and began building a backyard garden exhibit packed with cement sculptures, colored glass and mirrors, a hubcap tower, decorated buildings, and a vast array of found objects. Scattered throughout his labyrinth, you would find hand-painted signs with UFOs and strange creatures, Bible verses, sermons, and descriptions of Howard's elaborate and bizarre visions. Howard recounts perhaps the most pivotal vision of his life that occurred in 1976 while he was patching a bicycle wheel with white paint. Here's a soundbite of Howard's own description of the encounter.
I got my first calling to paint. I was pastoring churches, and while I was pastoring churches at Christmas time, I'd see a lot of little kids that wouldn't have a new bicycle, and they looked so pitiful. And I started building bicycles, rebuilding bicycles for poor kids, And I got to doing that, and I got to patching on them bicycles, and I patched with a little brush, and somehow it didn't do good, and I got to patching with my finger. So I just took this finger here and dipped it down in paint and started patching on this bicycle, and I dipped in to get some more paint, and I looked to see if I had enough paint on my finger, and when I did, there was a face on my finger. Can you see that finger right there that face is on? Well, that's what happened. I dipped this finger in paint and come up with it, and there's a face on that finger right there. And there's something come to me like a voice, a soundless voice said, "Paint sacred art." And I said to that voice, I said, "I can't do that." I said, "Artists can do that, but not me." I said, "I've seen them do it, but not me." And it come to me again. "How do you know you can't? How do you know you can't? How do you know you can't?" And that dawned on me. How do I know? And I was thinking all the time, I think to myself, how do I know that I can't paint?
Howard goes on from here to describe how he took a dollar bill out of his wallet and set out to paint the face of George Washington to prove to himself and to the voice that he couldn't paint. Only instead, he found out he could paint. Before his death in 2001, Howard Finster had produced over 46,991 pieces of art and has become the most influential folk artist of all time. In 1983, he collaborated with the band R.E.M. on a painting for the cover of their album Reckoning. In 1985, the group Talking Heads commissioned Finster to paint the cover of their album Little Creatures, which became Rolling Stone's album cover of the year. For Howard, his art was always a means of conveying his deep-rooted faith to as many people as possible. Another of Howard's influential visions involved a giant 15-foot man standing at the gate of his yard. The man said to him, "Get on the altar." And then a second time, the man repeated the command, "Get on the altar." And as he said this the second time, the man shrunk from his overbearing stature to the size of a normal man. Howard later concluded the vision was to instruct him, if you want to be big in the world, you have to get on the altar. And when the man shrank, it was to say if he didn't get on the altar, he wouldn't be big in the world. So Howard says he got on the altar and he stayed there for the rest of his life, working on God's sacred art and the blueprints he received in his visions. When I think of Howard's strange work and how he met his initial call to make sacred art with uncertainty and doubt, I'm reminded of the famous quote from Vincent van Gogh, "If you hear a voice within you say you cannot paint, then by all means paint, and that voice will be silenced." Who are we to say what we can or cannot do? Who are we to question when a voice speaks to us from a donkey, a burning bush, or a smudge of paint on a man's fingertip? In fact, if all things are possible with God, perhaps we are the only hindrances to ourselves from discovering what creative capacities lay hidden within our own hearts.
Man of visions, that's what they tell me. I see visions.
Thank you so much for listening to the Makers and Mystics podcast. Please consider supporting the production of these podcasts at patreon.com/makersandmystics. Also, if you haven't yet, please leave us a review on iTunes and find us on Instagram at instagram.com/makersandmystics. Music for this episode is provided by the band Seamonster. Links to Seamonster are in the show notes of this episode. The opening audio clips were provided by Calvin Burgamy and Kenny Gray. Next week, we'll be returning with one of our full-length interview episodes, so be sure to catch us then. We'll see you next time.
Oh, what a rapturous sound. Listen closely. Oh, what a wonderful noise. Song of heaven for our ears to enjoy. That's what they tell me. I see visions, and I paint what I can.
I'm a stranger to people on this planet. I'm sent here for a purpose to do a job. I don't claim to be an artist. I'm sort of like a contractor. When I get my work finished, I'll be satisfied.